Get reaction. Let's speak now to David Mencer, who's a spokesman for the Israeli government. He joins me live now from Tel Aviv. David Mencer, thank you so much for being here on BBC News. Your reaction to that, first of all.
Well, firstly, thank you, Matthew, for having me on. Look, the truth is about Francesca Albanese is that she is not an impartial, someone that looks at this whole conflict impartially. She's got a record as long as your arm. Just in 2022, the Congress, congressmen from both sides of the House, said that she should resign because she has a ridiculous hatred of my nation state. She doesn't even believe that Israel should exist. She's made that clear again and again and again. So, look, it is a terrible conflict which is going on in Gaza. It's a war. It's a terrible war which we didn't want, we didn't ask for, and it is terrible when civilians are killed. But the truth of the matter is that the combat ratio right now, while it's very unpleasant, is 1-to-1. That means one terrorist to one civilian. That's what the Prime Minister has made clear. So these ridiculous remarks by Francesca Albanese, they really shouldn't be given any credence, because she is unfortunately got a long record of hatred for my country. I don't think she
obviously disputes that.
Of course she would. Of course she would, Matthew. Of course she would.
I'm reminded the phrase of playing the man, not the ball, which means that you're going after her rather than addressing the issues. Let me talk about the issues, because she lists, and it is a long list, why she considers that they've reached the threshold for genocide. One of the reasons is that she talks about the restrictions of aid supplies. Now, it's not just her saying that. It is not just the UN. It is not just aid agencies. You had the UK Foreign Secretary only a few days ago talking about Israel impeding the delivery of aid supplies. You had the EU's foreign policy chief saying this is a man-made famine made by Israel. So you can go after Francesca Albanese, but you have leading figures and voices who are making the same point about aid deliveries.
Matthew, I certainly don't want to go after Francesca Albanese. Let's just look at the facts.
No, just address the point about the humanitarian aid being impeded. You've made the point about her. Now talk about the issue, which is the obstruction of humanitarian aid.
The point of inviting me on here is to answer the question. So give me an opportunity to please answer the same
answer is the point I'm making to you.
I'm not, obviously. Thank you, Matthew, for making that point. I know it's your job to give me a hard time, and I'm happy to receive a hard time. We are a democratic country, and of course, we're not above criticism, and we will take all criticism on the cheek as it's intended. But allow me to reply. Now, my first point to make is that she has made this pronouncement, but of course, the ICJ, which is the highest court of the United Nations, did not say there was genocide happening. So that's the first point.
They are looking at these issues.
Right.
They are currently looking at them.
There is a war going on.
So address, forgive me, because I've asked you now two times to address the issue about humanitarian aid. Just address the issue, the question I'm asking you.
I'm happy to. I'm happy to address.
So far.
Okay, so let me address the issue of humanitarian aid, which is an important point. First things first. All casualties of civilians, particularly, are a terrible thing. They are a tragedy, which should not have happened. They have, of course, happened because Hamas declared war on my people.
Sorry, my question, and I apologise for continuing to interrupt you. My question again is about impeding humanitarian aid, and it's the third time I've asked you that.
Let me tell you about humanitarian aid. Today, just today, more than 200 trucks of humanitarian aid went into Gaza. The problem is not aid going into Gaza. We are letting as much aid as we possibly can into Gaza.
So David Cameron is wrong, the EU foreign policy chief is wrong.
No, I'm not saying, let me explain to you what the situation, the issue is distribution. The UN, unfortunately, of which Francesca is a part of, the UN is hopelessly disorganized when it comes to distributing the aid. Hamas are, of course, stealing the aid. And these are images, unfortunately, which are coming out of Gaza. You're not showing the images of bustling markets, which there are in southern Gaza. You're showing more negative images. These are, of course, the images which Hamas wants you to see. I can guarantee you one thing, Matthew, that no one in Hamas is starving. Hamas steal the aid and then they sell it onto the black market for vastly inflated prices. And it is the UN which, unfortunately, has been grossly inefficient. And
you
UNRWA,
talked in that answer
in particular,
about 200 trucks going in.
Yeah, more than 200, 258, I think, today.
Before the conflict started, 500 trucks a day were going into Gaza. This
Matthew,
war has now gone on.
If I could correct you, there were 78 trucks a day. No, sorry, 70 food trucks a day went in to Gaza. Food trucks alone. We're not sending in concrete right now for obvious reasons.
The point I'm going to make is we've had 173 days of this conflict. Before the conflict, 500 trucks a day were going in. If you do the maths, that's 86,500 deliveries a day over that period of 173 days of this conflict. So nowhere near that amount has gone in. You said, the Israeli government at the start of this conflict, that you were going to stop anything going in and out of the Gaza Strip. That's exactly what you've done, isn't it?
Well, let me give you the facts rather than the propaganda. 18,000 trucks, more than 18,000 trucks have gone in since this conflict. Again, a conflict we didn't want, this war against us that we didn't want. 18,000 trucks have gone in. I've told you about the looting already by Hamas. Now, the point I want to make to you is that
86,000 would have been the figure that went in before the conflict.
I'm talking about food trucks. We're not sending in concrete anymore, Matthew. Okay, that concrete has been used rather than to build schools and hospitals, which is the right thing to do with it. Concrete has been used to build a tunnel network twice the size of the tube in London, twice the size of the tube in London. It is a crime. Money which should have been used to build up the Palestinian people, to give them a chance, to give them a hopeful future, was sunk into the ground by the ruthless, terrible people of Hamas.
A final question then. Let me ask you a final question, because you've had now...
Could I reply to the point about aid which has not been allowed through? Only 1.5% of trucks have been, of goods have been denied because of their dual use. And most of those have gone in later as well when the offending articles were changed. So it simply isn't true. We must look at the facts right now. We don't want to harm Gazan civilians. We have no interest in harming Gazan civilians. We're after Hamas. We're after the genocidal murderers of Hamas, and we need our hostages back right now.
Just a final thought then, because even the US appears to be losing patience. You saw what happened at the UN Security Council. They've been really open. It will be a mistake to launch a ground offensive in Rafah. Why do you think it is that even your staunchest allies are now having real fears about operationally how you're conducting this war? And are you going to change any of the current strategy going forward?
Well, unfortunately, this conflict which we're facing right now is not a far-off land of which we know little. It is right on our doorstep. It is hundreds of meters away from our communities. So we haven't got a choice. We need to fight. We need to fight this genocidal gang of murderers. And, you know, the only people that celebrated that UN resolution, which the US unfortunately abstained from, the only people that celebrated, and they said this quite openly, were Hamas and Iran. Now, I want to tell you, Matthew, that Hamas and Iran are enemies of the UK as well as Israel. So none of us should be rejoicing about this fact of this UN vote. But the Prime Minister has made clear, and with this, for this point, he has the entire backing of this country, the 9 or 10 million people living here, that Hamas must be destroyed. We must finish the job. As Benny Gantz, our minister, has said, you cannot put out 80% of the fire and leave 20% going, because that fire will again consume Gaza, and they will attack us again, because that's what they've said.
David Mencer, we have to leave it there, but thanks for joining us live here on BBC News.
Thank you, Matthew. Good to speak to you. Welcome.